Today we'll be talking about gathering feedback with surveys. And the agenda we'll go over is to discuss what a survey is, how surveys are used in the TMS. We'll take a look at what a survey looks like to our end users. We'll review some tips on writing surveys. Then we'll look at how we actually create a survey in the TMS and how you can view results. So, what are surveys? A survey is a way to collect data from a group of respondents to gain information and insight into a topic of interest. Our topic of interest for the most part is going to be training. And you'll probably be looking at your students as the biggest group of respondents. So we'll be focused more on that than other respondents. The big picture of looking at how to create surveys is you're going to take some time and design your questions. Once you have those in place, you'll come to the TMS and name and save your survey. After that, you can hit that design link and add the questions that you've premeditated. From there, your surveys can be added to the organization level, the course level for defaults, and directly onto classes. You can, if you like, add an automated notification to arrive after the class is over as a reminder to take the survey. Your responder can take the survey in the class, and it can be pointed at students, instructors, or an organization administrator. And after a survey has been taken, the results can be viewed by the takers, by the respondents, and also by instructors and administrators. So let's take a look at what a survey looks like. And I'm sharing my second screen now with a survey. So surveys and how they're used in the TMS are only available through instructor-led classes, and they display at the bottom of the activities section. So this is a student survey. We have 3 different types of respondents that the surveys focus on. That is students, instructors, and organization administrators. For a student, the only students that can see or take a survey are the ones that are enrolled into a class. And the survey shows at the bottom of the class activities. And then when they see it is by default 4 hours before the class ends, up to 30 days after the class ends. And this can be modified either on the class or on the defaults of the organization. Our next type of survey taker is an instructor. And instructors, the only instructors that can see a survey are the ones that are assigned to the class as an instructor. The survey shows at the bottom of the class activities. And the survey is on display there before the class starts, and they are able to take it during the class and after the class ends. And there is no end date on that. And the last type of survey we have is for organizations. And the survey again shows at the very bottom of the class activities. This is available to administrative roles that have the ability to create and edit classes. And like the instructor, it displays before the class starts, but is only able to be completed during the class or after the class is ended. And I mentioned earlier that you could have automated notifications added to remind users to fill out the survey after the class ends. If you'd like to have one of these, is an email that's triggered through TMS. Automated notifications will be available for operations managers to both manage and create. The automated notification can be set up for a specified amount of time after the class ends. For surveys, that's most helpful, either before the class ends or after the class ends. We also have triggers for before the class begins and after the class begins. You can, in the text of the email that you're writing for the notification, you can add text replacement fields for things like the user's first name, their last name or full name, class date, instructor name, and a link over to the enrollment where they can take the survey. And there are many other replacement fields, but those are ones that would pertain to your surveys. So there are 3 places where you might actually, where you can control surveys. One is at the organization profile. And on the organization profile, you're able to set up defaults for your classes and courses. And under the Preferences tab is where you're going to go and scroll on down to where we have surveys. And you can add the surveys that you want to appear in new courses or new classes. Anytime that you create that new course or new class for your organization, you can have surveys that default here. You can see I have an organization level survey for my student sample. You can set the defaults for when that survey appears to your student. We say 4 hours by default before a class ends. You can change it to however many hours after the event begins or ends, before it ends. And you can set any amount of days that the survey is available. That's up to you. One thing to take a look at, and when you go out to choose surveys, just so you know, any survey you've written is available to be put in any survey slot. You'll want to make sure that you're naming your surveys appropriately so you can figure out what course, what class, what user they're going to be available for. And I've set up 3 surveys that are appearing by default through the organization and 3 that are appearing by default on the course so that we can tell them apart. So this is where you would do it for an organization. Set up your defaults. We also have defaults on the course level. So maybe most of your classes that you run are going to be using the survey that you've used as default on the organization, but then you have a couple of courses that you want a specific survey to be used. So if you put surveys at the course level, they're going to preempt that organization level default, and any class created off of this course will use the surveys added here. So I go to the Advanced tab, and again, I have the ability to add my student surveys, and these 2 are my course survey for my student and my course survey for my instructor. And I haven't added anything for the organization survey. And that means that the organization survey from the organization profile is the one that's going to show up when I create a class using this course. So let's take a look at creating a class using the surveys defaults. So I'm going to create this class, look for a survey course, and this one is the one that has no surveys added at the course, so I should see all of the organization survey defaults showing up. I'm going to go to Advanced Settings here for my Create Class, and then I'm going to be able to see all of my student surveys, my instructor survey, and my organization survey. And you can see that these are my org ones that are coming over from the org profile. So let's go up and change my course and use my other survey course. And this is the one that has surveys added to the course. And I click OK. And now I'm getting the survey that came from the course for the student and also for the instructor. But because I had no survey at the course level, it pulled from the organization profile. And once you come to a class, you can come in and if you have no default surveys, you'll just see none here, and you can go out and choose a survey. And you can see I can go out and change my surveys to anything I want at the class level, regardless of what the defaults were. So that's looking at creating it where you can control when the surveys come. So what does a survey actually look like? We're going to use the preview of the survey here, and it shows exactly as the end user will see the survey for themselves. So I can add separate pages for surveys or just use one and have all my questions on the same page. Each page comes with a heading option. You can use the heading option or leave it blank. And I've just separated each one of my pages and headings into different types of questions. I have options for multiple choice questions with one answer or multiple answers. I have text box questions and essay questions available. I have rating scale of questions that allow me to put things into a matrix. And then I have also matrix questions where I can answer one per row or multiple per row. And take a look at those. So, but this one I can only do one. And then click done. And then the survey would have been submitted by that user. And I'm going to close that up. So before we go in and see how to create a survey in the TMS, let's go and talk about our best practices and tips for creating surveys, writing them up. So my first tip on best practices for writing surveys is to avoid placing survey questions out of context or out of order. So if I have a section where I'm asking questions about facilities, I don't want to pop in a question about my instructor. You may want to try to use a funnel approach where at the beginning you're using very broad questions and general questions, move to more specific questions in the middle of the survey, and end with some easier questions so they actually finish it. Our tip number 2 is avoid using loaded questions or leading words. So subtle word differences can actually influence results and may get you different results than what you're actually looking for. Try to avoid using speculative terms like could, should, or might. And those questions actually change the flavor. Those words actually change the flavor of a question. So I might say a fireman could save a cat in a tree, or should save a cat in a tree, or might save a cat in a tree. Some of those are speculative, and should sounds a little bit like my own judgment. You might want to use did, a fireman did save a cat in a tree, did, does, and can are good options for questions. Tip number 3, build questions that clearly represent the information you want to gather. If you add a vague question, you won't really know what specifically people are answering about. So if I say something in general, like, do you like eggs? It could be unclear it is unclear what the responder does or doesn't like about them. Do they like or dislike the taste, the texture, the cholesterol level, or the preparation of them, fried, boiled, scrambled. So if you want to be specific, you might want to ask a question like, do you like the texture of boiled eggs, to really get an answer for what you are specifically looking for. Tip number 4, don't ask 2 questions in one. If you ask 2 questions in one, you won't really know which side of the question a responder might be answering, or if they're trying to combine the answer into both. So you could get a variety of different results. For instance, you might ask what internet service is fastest and most economical for you. And some people might answer on basis of fastest. Some might answer on the basis of economical, because it's unlikely that those are the fastest is also the most economical. Or someone might try to combine both and come up with the median between them. So if you're looking for which one is fastest, you should break it into that, a question into 2, which internet service is fastest for you and what internet service is most economical for you. Tip number 5, wording in questions should not be confusing or unfamiliar. We are in a technical training industry, and we have a lot of industry-specific jargon and acronyms that can be confusing to people. Never hurts to use an acronym and then define it. Make sure that the language level that you're using is understood by your responders. For instance, You could ask me a question about an ISP and I would understand what you're talking about, but if you ask my mom a question about an ISP, she would be completely lost. So just make sure your language level is right for your responders. Number 6, for multiple selection questions, try to use complete listings of selection options or make certain to cover at least 90% of what the respondent answers would be. So when you're asking or giving answers for your questions, try to cover all your bases that they might want to respond. For instance, if I ask if the temperature in the classroom was comfortable, I might ask if it was too hot, a little warm, just right, cool, or very cold, or cold. And that pretty much covers your options there for them. But if you're not certain you've covered all your options, you can add an other option as an option and allow them to show you that you didn't cover what they had been thinking about. For number 7, use your long questions wisely. So multiple choice questions tend to be the longest and most complex for people to answer. So it's going to take them time to think through what it is you're asking and what options they want to answer. Free text answers are the shortest and the easiest for people to answer. When you increase, keep in mind that as you increase the length of your questions and the length of your survey, you are going to decrease the chance of receiving a completed response. People will look at it and give up or not give you a full response for the survey. Number 8, don't force respondents to answer. So your respondents may not want to, or they may not be able to provide an answer for the information you're requesting. We do have a required field on all the questions. Use it judiciously. Remember that privacy is very important to most people. Questions about their income or finances or occupation are going to be things that people might feel are intrusive for you to be asking about. You can give them assurances of confidentiality to encourage them to answer. But the best option is, if you're requiring an answer, to have a prefer not to answer option so they can opt out of that as well. Number 9 and 10 are going to be tips about rating scale and matrix questions. So these are the questions that have the multiple columns across and rows of questions down. And a best practice for this is to keep your column choices short. So don't put a whole paragraph of information above the column that they have to digest every time they're trying to answer a question for that. And even keeping your rows short, comments or statements short helps as well. And avoid creating too many rows or columns. Keeping that to 5 columns or 5 or less rows is a good measure. Remember that if your matrix is too large, people tend to speed through their answers and just to get through the question quickly. So they might do what is a straight line. They'll answer the same value for all the rows. So they might say disagree, 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 disagree straight down instead of giving you valid answers. And number 10, just a heads up on most common response scales. So you might go from strongly agree to strongly disagree, from very likely to very unlikely. A similar one to that is very probable to very improbable. Others include very happy to not at all happy, and very important to not very important. So those could help you in designing those questions. Let's go back and look at creating a survey. And we're going to go to the Create Survey screen. It's on your survey tile with a link to create the survey. And people come to this page and sometimes they're confused because it doesn't look like I can really create a survey here. What we have to do first is actually create a record to hold all the content of the survey. So we're asking you to come here and name the record And again, you want to be very specific about what the name is. In fact, if you're using it for a specific course, I would put the course name in here or the course type, and definitely the role of whoever the user is that it's pointed at. And then you can put a description in that will help others understand what the survey is about. If you have multiple organizations that you manage, you can change, set the organization management here, and then you're going to hit save. Once we save, we now have the edit and design and a couple other links up here. If I edit, I'm just going back into my survey. I can change my information I've input, or I could disable it. If I go to design, I can now create a survey. I'm going to go back to the one that I already created so that I don't have, just to make it easier for us. So let's go to design. And from here, you're always going to have a page that you're working in. You can choose to create a page with a heading on it or not. If I add a page, that first page name option comes up, and I can either put a name in or just click OK and add the page. From here, I can go back and edit the name, and I'll see that little dialog box again. I can move a page. I can also move questions, and they all work the same way. So if I click on move, here it's, I would be canceling the move because it's keeping the page in the same place. I have to go down to where the page could be moved to. So if I move it from page 1 to page 2, I can move it here, and it becomes page 2. And I really don't want this empty page, so I'm going to delete it. And that's how you can delete and you get your warning. Let's go back up to our multiple choice questions and take a look. You can see here are my page functions and here are my question functions. And I'm going to edit my question and we'll go over it. So each question, you're going to choose a question type. We have multiple choice with one answer, multiple choice with multiple answers, a single text box or multiple text box. A text box holds up to 40 characters. A comment or an essay text box, and that holds up to 4,000 characters. We have rating scale questions, matrix with one answer per row, or matrix with multiple answers per row. So you'll choose the question type. Each answer has to have a question text in it, and then there's different options based on what type of question that you input. So for this is multiple choice with one answer, I have it as a true false. I could in fact change it and have multiple different labels in here and continue to add more labels as I wish. And you can set whether or not this is required to answer. If it's set to be required and they don't answer it, the survey will not be submitted for them until they answer the question. So I'm going to cancel that out. And this is a one answer. The second type is multiple choice. You design it the same way. You're just going to put in the ability to add multiple answers. And I've queued in that this is a multiple answer by letting them know to select all answers that apply. So the text box and essay questions are pretty simple. When you add a text box, it's only one can be added because I've added a single text box, and all I have to do is enter the question text. If I'm doing multiple text box, I have the ability to add text boxes, as many as I wish. And the survey works the same as the single text box. You're just going to enter a text and it will pop that answer field in for you. For rating scales, this is a matrix style question. I want to edit the question and I would choose rating scale. I'd answer, I'd put in the text for the question, and then each one of these are rows appear to the side and each of the columns appear at the top of the column area. And you can add as many rows as you like just by continuing to click add. You can delete them and you can add a single row here or column here, I lied, or you can add multiple columns by clicking the go link right there. And again, you can delete anything that you want. And you can see that the rating scale over here has weights to each answer. So you can add a weight for that question. The matrix are unweighted questions. So this is a single question, a single answer per row, and it's built the same way as the rating scale question was. Whereas this one lets me do one answer per row. This allows me to, this multiple answer per row is allowed in here, and I can say, oh, Siamese are active, they're a picky eater, they're very loud, and they are talkative. Whereas a Maine Coons is large, much bigger than other cats. And they probably, well, maybe they're picky eaters. But I don't even have to answer all the scales because all of the rows because I don't require an answer on this question. So that is how you can build out your survey. In terms of looking at responses is our next piece and last piece, viewing the results. Each responder, who are you? I don't want the manager, is allowed to not only take a survey, I'm coming in as a student now, and when I go in and launch my survey to take it, I kept it short and sweet on this sample, and click done. I can see now, I can shut my window, and I can see that it's been completed. If I actually refresh my screen, I can come back in and review my survey and see what it was that I actually said. This is all from the class, so if they need more information on the event and when it took place, they can click on that, and they can see their response, but they cannot make any changes to it. So that's my student. Let's take a look at an instructor and what they can see. So my instructor, if they have a survey as well, can take it and review it. They can also take a look at the survey results from their students. They can export an anonymous survey responses that removes the username and the email address from the in the export. They can export it with all of that information in it, and they can look at a survey results from the page. And this again gives them the information about the event, where it was taken. It lets them see who responded, and it gives them the number of responses and the percentage that that gives in that answer. So that is how an instructor can see the survey responses. And our last one is our administrator. So the administrator, if they only want to see results from a class, can go to that class and view the results just the same as an instructor is able to review and export the results. And you can see here, I can view the survey responses and export those survey results as well. Let's take a look at the survey responses. I have a filter by when that survey was taken, and I can set the, the time based on that. I'm going to look at any time it was taken. And this allows me to see how many responses were there and who made those responses. Each of the users is listed. But you can't see here the class. You do get that on the export. And then I get the number of responses and the percentage that goes with it on each one of my results. If I have a text field, I can click on my 6 responses over here and see what it is that people liked. And each one of these fields I can also open and take a look at. And my essay question, I can also take a look at my answers that way. So on the scale questions, I do get the number of answers and what percentage answered for that question, that response for that question, and I can take a look at all of those. The other way to take a look at these is to export them. We'll take a very quick look at this. This does give you things like the class class name, when the class was started and ended, who the instructor was. So it gives you a little more information than that response. It also gives each student and their exact answers. And just note that each of the, we also get a response for the question and the label and the response. So the label becomes important when you get into those matrix style questions. You know, lists the 3 types of cast. This is a text field, so A, B, and C. I get all 3 of those answers on separate lines. And when I get down into my matrix or style questions, I also have each row and what answer it was for each row on separate pages. So that makes it really easy to pull it into something like a pivot table and do an analysis of the data. Thank you for joining us for this overview of surveys. That's all that we are talking about today. And I thank you for attending and participating in our webinar.